Hello, everyone, and welcome today to our webinar all about BioBlitzes. So I'm Lauren.
And I'm Sarah.
And we're here from the Youth Advisory Council at the Jane Goodall Institute of Canada. And so today we'll tell you a little bit about the what, the why, and the how of BioBlitzes. Very exciting. So I'm glad you're here joining us. So before we start, I wanted to do just a short land acknowledgement. I think especially because with this project, as you'll learn, you're out and about in nature, out on the land. And so I think kind of being aware of the spaces that you're in are really important. So I'll just read this. So the JGIC BioBlitz gathers observations from green spaces all across Turtle Island. By engaging with the natural elements of these lands, we honor and respect the traditional Indigenous stewards of these spaces. To show our gratitude for their stewardship, please make sure that you leave things as you saw them on the trail, making sure not to disrupt or alter how you found them. We hope that this BioBlitz allows you to appreciate and explore the outdoors while maintaining respect and consideration for those who have protected it for generations. So I also will encourage you to look up the Indigenous groups whose land you're on, just to better connect with them while you're out doing this challenge. So I think the biggest question right now might be, what is a BioBlitz? What is this fun word? So BioBlitz is a challenge where you're trying to find and identify as many species as possible in a specific area within a set time frame. So this is why it kind of takes the form of challenge, because you can even get a bit competitive with it and try and count as many species as you can, take as many photos as possible, that sort of thing. So it's just a fun way to engage and learn about the natural spaces around you. So a really common way that we do BioBlitzes nowadays is using apps or websites. So iNaturalist is one of the most common ways. We'll teach you how to use this app and how to participate in our challenge. But there are other tech-free ways to do it as well, which we'll also mention. And I think that because there's so many options, it's a super flexible and adaptable kind of resource and challenge that you can take part with anyone wherever you are. So a few reasons of why doing a BioBlitz is a really fun idea. I think getting outdoors and just seeing the world in a new light is a really great thing to do. I think, when you're out and about and you're specifically looking for animals and you're specifically looking for birds or bugs, you'll notice a lot of things that you never would have beforehand. You get to see all these new places. Maybe you do a BioBlitz in your neighborhood with some friends, or maybe you decide to go a little further and take a day trip to a national park, to a provincial park. You get to explore new places and just see the species in these new locations. With our challenge, as you'll learn, we're running it sort of nationwide. So you can explore the observations that people are making, in the Maritimes and on the West Coast, and learn about the incredible variation of species that we have here in Canada. And then finally, it's a great way to build community, to meet new people, to engage with neighbors, friends, coworkers, whoever you'd like to. And as we mentioned, it's super flexible. You can really have this challenge take on so many forms. And that means it's really adaptable to anyone who wants to participate. So I'll pass it off to Sarah now to take over another reason why BioBlitzes are super important and super cool.
Thank you so much, Lauren. So another really special reason for doing a BioBlitz, especially BioBlitzes through existing platforms such as iNaturalist, is it gives you the opportunity to actually contribute to important scientific research. Data from iNaturalist and similar platforms is made available to scientists across the world and gives them the opportunity to gather much larger data sets with much more information and more observations than it's possible to do elsewhere. In fact, as of right now, over 4,000 scientific papers have actually been published using data from iNaturalist. And these include papers finding new incidences of species that are thought to be extinct in certain areas. These include papers identifying that current species are beginning to split into new species. as well as papers marking the first sightings of species in new areas, such as the first sighting of an endangered bee within a city. So, as Lauren mentioned, the Jane Goodall Institute of Canada is actually currently hosting our own BioBlitz, if you would like to join and learn what it's like to be a participant in iNaturalist. Currently, we are challenging Canadians to observe native animal species across Canada, and it is currently running until the end of July on iNaturalist. As of this moment, we have over 100 observations of over 61 species, including birds, mammals, and invertebrates such as insects and arachnids. So iNaturalist is an excellent platform for running your own BioBlitz if you are reasonably tech savvy, and your participants will also be reasonably tech savvy with access to things like cell phone cameras. So I'm about to show you how to actually set up your own BioBlitz project, as well as how to add an observation on iNaturalist. So the first thing is to make yourself an iNaturalist account. This is the home page of your account. Now, to set up a project, you'll go to Projects and select Start a Project. iNaturalist has two options for projects, collection projects and umbrella projects. However, for a BioBlitz, collection projects are a lot more suitable. Collection projects actually effectively gather data that fits the parameters of the project by default. So participants do not have to manually add their observations to your project, as it will automatically gather anything that meets the existing parameters. So we can go ahead and get started with our sample. So the first thing you need is some project information. You will need a name for your project, as seen here. You will need an icon for your project. This is optional, but if you want to make it extra fancy, extra cool looking, this would be the project icon for our BioBlitz Splash. There's also the option for a banner image. This is what a banner image would look like, as well as a background color for your summary, as seen here. And finally, you have to put a short summary of what your project is. In the case of our project, we describe who we are, what we're challenging people to do. In this case, look at native Canadian wildlife. Now, your project for a BioBlitz should be a collection project. So moving on to observations. This set of information gives you filters for which observations your project will automatically encompass. So starting here, taxa is basically what organisms will be included. This could be literally every living thing. This could be members of only a single species. Our BioBlitz includes anything that is an animal, so we're excluding plants and fungi. You could also have a plant-specific BioBlitz or a fungus-specific BioBlitz. The options are as broad or as narrow as you'd like it to be. Then there's the options for places, which basically sets a geographic boundary for you. Only observations that occur within this area will be counted. So in our case, our project's boundaries are across all of Canada, but you can also restrict it extremely small to specific points of interest, or maybe an individual city or neighborhood. Now, you have the option to manually add users to a BioBlitz project. However, it's a little bit more labor intensive than the other option to restrict your project to members only, which is right down here. You can select this, and this means that only people who join your project, only observations from those people will be included. And this is a little bit easier to make your project members only than having to manually type every included username. There are also options here for including observations with specific annotations. These include, is this organism alive? Is this organism an adult or juvenile? That kind of thing. Most of these are not necessarily for a generalized BioBlitz, but they are interesting options. Now moving on to data quality. This takes a little bit of explanation, and there is more information found on iNaturalist's very helpful FAQ page. But to start with a quick summary, observations that need ID or a research grade are considered verifiable. This means they have a date, a location, a photo, and are not of an animal that is captive, so say an animal in a zoo, or cultivated, say a farm animal. For an observation that begins with needing ID to become research grade, two people have to have added an identification to the project or to the observation. This means the observer and another member of iNaturalist has seen the observation and agreed with what species it's identified as. There are some more specifics, but they're more important for data use in research than for building engagement. So for example, our BioBlitz includes options that need ID and research grade. iNaturalist also allows observations to be made of photos or sounds or both. So if you were wanting to do something with birdsong, for example, but in general, photos are usually more useful and a little bit more fun. So now we have establishment means. This basically means, is this species native to the area, or has this species come in through some sort of human means? Our BioBlitz only looks at native species. However, you could broaden it to all species if you wanted to include introduced species that might be invasive, or just non-native, such as dandelions. There's also options to set date ranges for your iNaturalist project. You can have any date and just close it when you feel like it, or you can have a specific range and time. It's also worth noting here that you can always edit your projects. So if you decide, like we did, that you want to extend your BioBlitz, you can easily go back in, edit the project, make it longer. Now, I'll go into a bit more detail on this part here, but there are options to trust project administrators with hidden coordinates, which I will discuss a little bit more when I demonstrate how to actually add an observation to iNaturalist. But in general, this means that you can typically hide the location of your observation if you want to keep it a bit more private. And allowing members to trust this means that members of your project can say, my observation location will be hidden, but not to the administrators of this project. And finally, once you create your project, you can add additional iNaturalist users as administrators, and these people will also be able to edit and modify the project, as well as view things like hidden coordinates. So there you have it. That's actually how to create an iNaturalist BioBlitz project. As you can see, there's a lot of flexibility and there's a lot of options. So I'll also show you today how to actually add an observation to iNaturalist. So first, you'll start on your dashboard again, and you'll go up here to this green button that says Upload. You can manually choose files, or you can just drag and drop photos, as I've just done. So since this photo has what's called metadata, iNaturalist is able to grab a specific date and a specific location from the photo. However, you can also manually select and type in your date and your location. iNaturalist also often has options to suggest what species it is. However, you can also type in your own species, since, as you see here, that was not exactly an accurate species since it was observed in Calgary. So there's options for suggestion where you can select which species you think it might be based on visual similarity to other photos and what species have been observed in the area. This makes it a little bit easier than having to figure out what species it is right off the bat on your own. Now, moving on to that location settings. This is some important privacy settings for iNaturalist. Right now, this observation is considered public, which means that anyone can view the exact location that this observation occurred at. You can also set your observation to obscured, which effectively creates a much broader area in this circle. So instead of saying, oh, this bird was seen in Sarah's backyard, then it might say, okay, this bird was seen in Sarah's neighborhood. There's also the option for private, which will basically be absolutely no location will be visible to an outsider. So there's some excellent privacy functions built into iNaturalist. There's also some extra fields that you may or may not need, but probably they won't be super necessary for a standard photo-based BioBlitz. So I'm actually going to go ahead and submit this observation, and it should show up at some point in our BioBlitz bash. I will note here that sometimes it can take a little bit of time for observations to actually be added to a project. So we can try reloading it and see if it's there yet, but it might take it a couple hours even. So there's another iNaturalist option available for adding observations. This is the Seek app. You can see the icon here on the side. So Seek is a phone app created by iNaturalist that uses your phone camera to identify species and make observations. You can hold your camera up to an organism. It will identify it to species if possible, and then it gives you the option to add it as an identifier. As you can see here, if you are signed into iNaturalist on the Seek app, when you make one of these observations within the app, it gives you the option to automatically post it straight to iNaturalist. So it's also a really useful way of both IDing and creating observations. I will say that the Seek app is a little bit better for identifying things like plants or fungi than it is at identifying animals, as it does a little bit better with things that hold still for your camera. But regardless, it's an excellent way of posting to iNaturalist on the go, as well as getting IDs for your observations that you are posting via computer.
So now that we've gone through sort of the main ways to contribute on iNaturalist or Seek, there are a few different ways that you can actually run a BioBlitz that's more tech-free. I think that you can get really creative with these ways. If, let's say, you're an educator and you're doing this with a class of your students, not everyone will necessarily have a phone or an iPad to use. So you can do this very tech-free and make it a lot more creative. So it could be something as simple as going on a walk and writing down all the different kinds of bugs or animals that you see. You could do something like, okay, we're going on a 30-minute walk. Everyone has a little notepad, and every time you see a bird, you write down a little tally. And then at the end, it's kind of a competition to see who wrote down the most birds. I think you could even also do it as a scavenger hunt. You could get creative with this. You could print off a list of local species. You could have some reference photos, and you're trying to go through and cross off all the different local species and see who can find the most. So I think that you can even, adapt it based on where you are. Maybe there's more birds in your location. Maybe, you're in the prairies and you're looking for different kinds of bugs. So I think that based on where you are, you can come up with some really creative ways to do this tech-free or with low-tech options.
All right, so now that you know what a BioBlitz is, if you want to see what it's like to participate in a BioBlitz through iNaturalist, you can join our current BioBlitz, JGIC's BioBlitz Bash, and see what it's like to use iNaturalist as an observer. It's currently running until the end of July and can be joined once you have an iNaturalist account, either by searching the name JGIC's BioBlitz Bash in iNaturalist, or by following the link to the BioBlitz Bash in one of our many social medias.
We also encourage you to share this challenge with a friend, get friends, family members, colleagues involved as well. We would love to see engagement from all across Canada, learning about species all across our nation. And then once you've had the chance to participate and get to know the program a little bit, we would love to have you create your own BioBlitz. Maybe you do one during the winter, during the fall, start to learn about species, different times of year. You can come up with any kind of format you would like, but join our challenge for now, and we'd love to see you continue to engage with BioBlitzes in the future. So thanks everyone for watching our webinar. We hope you learned a lot about this really cool challenge.
Yes, thank you, everybody.